What if I told you that I have seen in the records of the soul a thread running through centuries, connecting the rise and fall of nations, the prayers of prophets, and the choices of modern men, and that this thread begins and ends with Persia, the land now called Iran? I do not speak from opinion, nor from fear of politics or war, but from what has been shown to me in the quiet chambers of consciousness where the history of the world unfolds, not as chaos but as rhythm, not as accident but as law. When I entered that vibration, I saw Persia shimmering like a golden seal pressed upon the scroll of time, carrying both blessing and burden, light and shadow, purpose and pride. I tell you plainly, the destiny of this land was written long before its borders were drawn, and its role in what men call the end times is not a new prophecy, but an ancient one, reawakening, for every age has its stage, and every nation its spiritual counterpart. And Persia's spirit moves again in the heart of Iran, preparing to fulfill the pattern set long ago. I was shown that in the divine design of earth, no nation stands alone, and that each bears a frequency within the great body of humanity. Persia's frequency is the vibration of wisdom tested by pride, of enlightenment shadowed by ambition. There was a time, I saw, when its kings sought not conquest but understanding, when the Magi watched the stars, not to predict fortune, but to read the language of heaven. But as ages passed, that light dimmed, and the hunger for knowledge became the hunger for control. Still, even in the darkest hours, the spirit of Persia remained chosen, not because of virtue, but because of purpose. The Eternal does not choose as men choose. He selects according to function, to awaken through contrast. That is why, in every age where deception multiplies, there arises a nation whose mirror reflects truth and error side by side, forcing the world to discern. Persia has ever been that mirror. In the records, I beheld Daniel standing in the court of Babylon, a captive whose faith made him free. When the empire of Babylon crumbled, it was Persia that rose, and Cyrus, king of that land, was called in the scriptures the Lord's anointed. Imagine that, a ruler outside the covenant, yet chosen to restore the covenant's people. This is the paradox of divine will. It uses even the hands of the foreigner to fulfill sacred law. Cyrus did not know that his decree to free the exiles was the echo of a promise made generations before, yet in obeying his inner voice, he became part of prophecy. The spirit of Persia in that age served as instrument of mercy. But what was mercy then may become judgment now, for cycles repeat when their lessons are ignored. The same energy that once opened doors of freedom can, when reversed, build walls of defiance. And so I saw that the Iran of today carries the same soul memory as the Persia of Daniel's vision. Once again, it stands between empires, challenging powers, aligning with those who resist what they call Western dominion. Yet behind the strategies and speeches, behind the movements of armies and oil, there moves a deeper intention, unseen by most but visible in spirit, the intention of balance. The world has grown arrogant, trusting in wealth and machinery, forgetting the laws of mind that govern even the affairs of nations. Therefore, as in ancient times, a force arises to test that arrogance, to remind the world that power without alignment to divine law collapses upon itself. That testing force now wears the name Iran, but its vibration is Persia reborn. You may ask, why would a God of love allow such conflict to arise? I tell you, because without tension there is no revelation. The human race, like the individual soul, grows not in comfort but in contrast. Nations are tested as souls are tested, until what is false breaks and what is true endures. In the visions I received, I saw Persia not as villain nor victim, but as catalyst. It provokes fulfillment. It awakens prophecy. It drives humanity to remember the spiritual roots of its own existence. This is why you will see, in the days ahead, alliances forming between Iran, Russia, and other lands, echoing the ancient coalition described by Ezekiel. These are not coincidences, but convergences, drawn by the magnet of destiny. Yet I must tell you, prophecy is not fatalism. The scroll of time contains possibilities, not prisons. Even as the script unfolds, free will writes new lines upon its surface. The people of Iran, like the people of every nation, hold within them both the potential for destruction and for illumination. For as I read in the vibrations, the divine purpose of Persia has always been to reveal through contrast the triumph of spirit over empire. When Persia opposed Babylon, light broke through captivity. When it now opposes Israel, light will break through confusion. The pattern remains: resistance precedes revelation. Many ask me, when will these things happen? The answer is not in the calendar, but in the consciousness of men. Prophecy accelerates when humanity ignores its inner law. The wars of the future begin as wars within, when fear conquers faith, when control silences compassion. That is why I say to you, watch not only the borders of nations, but the borders of your own heart. For what begins in the heart of one becomes the destiny of many. The conflict between Iran and Israel, between East and West, mirrors the inner division between ego and spirit, between the will to dominate and the will to serve. As long as that battle remains unresolved within, it must appear without until understanding dissolves it. In my readings, the divine often said that history is the shadow of consciousness. What we call geopolitics is but the outer echo of an inner vibration. If humanity desires peace, it must change the vibration from which its leaders act. Prayer is not passive. It alters the field in which nations move. That is why I tell you, do not despair when you see prophecy unfold. For prophecy is never punishment. It is the soul's opportunity to awaken. The end of an age is the birth of another. Iran's rising is a sign that the hidden currents of destiny are moving toward completion. The test that began with Babylon now reaches its final note, and those who listen with spirit will not fear, for they will know that even the turmoil of nations serves a divine harmony. I speak these things not to stir anxiety, but to call awareness, for I have seen that when the world trembles, heaven speaks the loudest. When I looked deeper into the records, I saw Persia standing not as a name in history, but as a vibration that continues to move through time, shaping kings, prophets, and the destinies of nations. In the great current of divine order, nothing is lost, and what begins in one age returns in another with the same lesson clothed in different forms. The rise of Persia in the days of Daniel was not coincidence. It was the precise working of spiritual law. When Babylon, symbol of arrogance and domination, had fulfilled its purpose, a new empire was called forth to restore balance. That empire was Persia, and in its ascension the world witnessed a strange paradox. Power used not to enslave but to liberate. Conquest turned into mercy, and the will of heaven expressed through a ruler who did not even know the name of the eternal he served. I saw Cyrus the Great as more than a man of strategy. He was a channel, an instrument through which divine intention flowed into history. In Isaiah it is written that the Lord called him his anointed, though he knew not God. And this reveals a truth that men often forget. The divine does not require awareness to act, only alignment. The universe moves through vessels, both willing and unknowing, using each according to the vibration they have earned. Cyrus acted with justice because justice was the vibration of his soul, and in doing so he became the unwitting servant of prophecy. The captivity of Israel under Babylon had been a lesson in humility, a mirror showing what happens when faith gives way to pride. And Persia became the hand of restoration, opening the gates for the exiles to return and rebuild. But within that act of mercy lay the seed of future reckoning, for in every movement of grace there lies a test. Would humanity learn that freedom must serve spirit, or would it once again mistake deliverance for dominance? I saw that Persia's strength was wisdom, but wisdom without humility hardens into presumption. In the centuries that followed, that presumption took root, and the same energy that once freed others began to seek control over them. History remembers the kings, but spirit remembers the vibration behind their reigns. Persia's vibration began to shift from servant to sovereign, from instrument to architect, and thus the balance that once restored the world began to tilt again. This is why the name Persia appears once more in the visions of Ezekiel, not as redeemer, but as participant in rebellion. It is the same frequency, repeating the same lesson until it is mastered. As I watched, I saw Daniel's vision unfold like waves upon the sea. The empire of silver rose upon the fall of gold. The Medes and Persians took the place of Babylon, yet the pattern remained, the pursuit of power clothed in divine purpose. Daniel, though a captive, was a watcher of that pattern, and his prayer recorded the truth that few understood. The kingdoms of men are temporary expressions of eternal laws. He saw that behind every empire stands an angelic force, a guardian or a tester, shaping outcomes according to the moral condition of the people. In the reading of the soul, I saw these guardians as intelligences of balance, not sentiment. When nations forget the source, they are allowed to rise into excess so that their fall becomes instruction. Persia rose because Babylon fell, but Babylon fell because it exalted itself beyond measure. Thus each empire becomes the correction of the last, and none are exempt from the same fate. I saw that the energy of Persia carried a rare combination: intellectual illumination and mystical insight, the capacity to unite science and spirit, matter and mind. In its highest form, that energy built universities, translated wisdom, studied stars, and sought harmony between heaven and earth. In its lowest form, it turned that same knowledge toward manipulation, control, and the worship of human reason. This duality is the secret of Persia's destiny. It is a nation forever standing between enlightenment and illusion. That is why in every age it draws both sages and tyrants, both prophets and deceivers. When the vibration of truth dominates, Persia becomes a bridge. When the vibration of pride prevails, it becomes a blade. Both are instruments in the hand of God. I saw that Daniel understood this when he refused to bow before the decree of kings. He knew that empires change, but law eternal remains. He read the writing on the wall long before the banquet of Belshazzar, for in the silence of prayer he had already seen the fall of pride and the rise of another order. That is why his service under Persian rule was not compromise but comprehension. He knew the difference between obedience to man and alignment with God. In the readings, I was told that Persia's future would again echo this paradox. It would stand as both deliverer and challenger, servant and rebel, mirror and judge. The same energy that freed Israel would one day test Israel, not as vengeance, but as fulfillment of law. For what is not reconciled in mercy must be balanced in manifestation. As I beheld this, I realized that history is not a line but a spiral. Each turning of the age revisits the same truths on a higher octave. The Persia of Cyrus, the Persia of Daniel, and the Iran of today are layers of the same spiral, each revealing how humanity responds to divine purpose under pressure. When the spirit of Persia is wise, it aligns with heaven. When it is proud, it becomes the tool of purification. Even now, the Iran that speaks defiance to the West is repeating the echo of its own past. It sees itself as liberator from corruption, challenger of tyranny, voice of divine justice against arrogance. Whether this belief is illusion or inspiration depends not on its politics but on its vibration. Nations, like souls, can serve the light even through shadowed means. The Eternal does not judge by appearance but by result. If through Iran's rising the world remembers the spiritual origin of order, then even its conflict will become a teacher. But if through its pride the world deepens in division, then another cycle of correction will begin, and that too will serve the same end. The difference lies not in prophecy but in perception. Men see war, spirit sees rebalancing. Men see nations, spirit sees lessons. When I entered the vibration of Persia's record, I felt not fear, but solemn purpose. I sensed a frequency older than empire, a wisdom that once guided Zoroaster and the Magi, a flame that still burns beneath the desert sand. That flame is both literal and symbolic, for it is the fire of discernment, the eternal struggle between light and darkness within man. Persia's destiny is to keep that fire alive until humanity learns to see it within themselves. In that sense, the prophecy of Persia is the prophecy of the world. The restoration begun under Cyrus was only the first act of a drama still unfolding, and Iran's modern defiance is but another scene in that same play. The actors change, but the author remains. Thus, when I speak of Persia, I speak of all humanity, for in the destiny of one nation we witness the reflection of the whole. What was written in Daniel's time is not finished, it is simply returning, and as it returns, every soul will be asked to discern which side of the flame it will stand on, the side of wisdom born of humility, or knowledge corrupted by pride. The prophecy of Ezekiel stands as one of the most precise revelations ever given concerning the destiny of nations, and in it I beheld the shadow of Persia stretching from ancient sands into the trembling light of our own age. When I entered that vibration, I saw not merely kingdoms at war, but forces of consciousness aligning like magnets around the poles of spirit and matter. Ezekiel spoke of a ruler named Gog from the land of Magog, leading a coalition of nations against Israel in the last days, and among those names was Persia. This is not a symbol detached from time. It is a living code within the spiritual record of humanity. Each nation mentioned corresponds to an energy pattern, and Persia's role is to reveal the moment when wisdom turns from servant of truth into servant of power. In that vision, the prophet saw armies rising from the north, a vast alliance, including the territories we now call Russia, Turkey, and Iran. These forces gathered not merely out of hatred for Israel, but out of a deeper impulse, the rebellion of the material mind against divine order. The purpose of prophecy is never prediction for curiosity's sake. It is revelation to awaken discernment. When the external world reflects the same patterns described in sacred text, it is not fate unfolding, but consciousness reaching a point of recognition. Ezekiel's vision, like all true prophecy, describes the intersection between the visible and the invisible. Persia, as part of that coalition, represents the intellect divorced from spirit, the knowledge that no longer remembers its source. That is why the prophecy warns that such alliances will rise, not to triumph, but to fulfill the law that every imbalance must meet its correction. I saw in that record a moment when the nations, confident in their might, descend upon Israel, believing themselves destined to erase her from the map. Yet it is not Israel they challenge, it is the covenant itself. For Israel in prophecy is not only a people or land, it is the principle of divine remembrance on earth, the symbol of consciousness that acknowledges the eternal. Thus, when Persia and its companions move against Israel, they move against that remembrance, and by doing so, they call forth the intervention of the law itself. The text declares that God will not allow such a coalition to succeed, that earthquakes, fire, hail, and confusion will descend upon the invaders until their armies destroy one another. This is not poetic exaggeration, but spiritual principle made visible, for when energies of domination unite without alignment to truth, they collapse under the weight of their own vibration. I have seen this pattern in the lives of men and in the rise and fall of empires, and it repeats because the universe does not tolerate imbalance indefinitely. In the field of divine order, every action generates its mirror, and what begins in arrogance must end in revelation. That is the meaning of the war of Gog and Magog. It is the moment when human pride confronts the boundary of its power and discovers that law, not force, governs existence. In our own age, as I observed the alliances forming between Iran, Russia, and Turkey, I felt that same vibration stirring once more. It is as if the script written in the days of Ezekiel is being rehearsed on the world's stage, each actor unaware of the role he plays, each convinced of his own purpose, yet all moved by the same invisible current. Iran's alignment with northern powers, its military presence in Syria, its funding of proxies in Lebanon, and its open hostility toward Israel are not isolated policies. They are expressions of a spiritual law seeking to complete itself. When prophecy manifests, it does so through the choices of free beings who unknowingly fulfill divine design. In the record, I saw that this gathering of forces is both literal and symbolic. Literal, because nations truly form alliances that threaten conflict. Symbolic, because those alliances represent the inner condition of humanity, the unification of fear, control, and resentment against the principle of love. Gog and Magog are not merely leaders or lands. They are vibrations. Gog is the arrogance of intellect. Magog is the momentum of material power. When these combine with Persia's energy of wounded wisdom, the result is inevitable confrontation with the divine law of balance. Many will see such events and cry that the end has come, but the end is only a veiled word for transformation. The Creator allows these convergences not to destroy, but to awaken, to force the soul of humanity to remember that without spirit, no civilization endures. The same pattern that appeared in the fall of Babylon, the collapse of Rome, and the shattering of every proud empire repeats now with modern symbols, nuclear power, digital control, political deceit, but the vibration is the same. It is the test of whether man will serve creation or attempt to replace the Creator. When Persia stands with the Northern Alliance, it fulfills its shadow role in prophecy, not as an eternal enemy, but as an instrument that summons divine correction. For when the balance is lost, the universe restores it through shock. I saw in vision the skies darkened with confusion, not only literal clouds of war, but the psychic clouds of fear spreading across the hearts of men. Yet amid that darkness, I also saw the light of understanding beginning to break through, for prophecy revealed is prophecy disarmed. When people awaken to the spiritual law behind events, they cease to feed the vibration that sustains conflict. That is why Ezekiel's message endures, to teach that the true battlefield is consciousness. The weapons of nations are only the shadows of thoughts long cultivated. If humanity were to cleanse its inner field, no outer war could persist. But as long as the desire for domination rules the collective mind, the prophecy will continue to manifest until the lesson is learned. Therefore, the inclusion of Persia in Gog's coalition is not condemnation of a nation, but description of a condition. The misuse of knowledge to challenge wisdom, the attempt of intellect to dethrone the divine. This, too, will end as all such attempts end in Revelation. When the law acts, it does not need armies, it uses consequence. The earthquakes and fire described by the prophet are metaphors of that consequence, the upheaval of systems built on deceit, the burning of structures not aligned with truth. And in that collapse, faith will find renewal. For Israel, which represents remembrance, will stand not by might but by divine intervention, proving once again that the eternal governs history. Those who witness this will see that prophecy is not prediction of doom, but demonstration of order. The fall of Gog and his allies will mark the turning of the age, when humanity finally understands that no coalition can prevail against consciousness itself. I tell you, this is already unfolding. The alliances are forming, the ideologies are hardening, and the vibration is reaching its climax. Yet fear not, for in the very moment of crisis, the divine balance will reveal itself, and those who hold faith will perceive that even Persia's defiance serves a higher harmony. For as in all cycles, rebellion precedes revelation, and what seems like war is the shadow of awakening. I tell you truly, when I beheld the visions of the present age aligned with those ancient prophecies, my spirit trembled not from fear, but from recognition. For the same forces that shaped the kingdoms of Daniel's time are now stirring again beneath the surface of our modern world. I have seen the shadow of Persia moving once more, and I have felt its vibration echoing through the hearts of men who do not yet know that they are acting out a drama written long before their birth. The names have changed, the borders have shifted, the banners bear new emblems, but the spirit behind them remains the same. For the energies of nations are eternal, and their purposes are cyclical. What was once called Persia now stands as Iran, yet the essence that drove its kings and prophets still breathes through its people and its leaders. I tell you, I have seen in the records that the alliances of today, those of Iran with Russia, with Turkey, with the powers that dwell in the northern lands, are not accidents of politics, nor the mere calculations of men, but the inevitable alignment of forces drawn by the magnet of destiny. In the vision, I saw these nations bound together not by love, but by the common current of resistance to the divine order, and their union was like the joining of rivers flowing toward a storm. They spoke of power, of independence, of justice against oppression, yet beneath their words was a deeper cry, the ancient rebellion that began when the created sought to outshine the Creator. And in that rebellion, I recognized the rhythm of Gog and Magog awakening once more. When I turned my inner sight toward the Middle East, I saw the land of Israel as a point of fire, a light upon which the eyes of all nations would one day fix. Around it gathered the restless energies of envy, ambition, and ideology, each claiming righteousness, each certain of its cause, yet all unaware that they were instruments of a greater law. The world called these movements political, but I knew them as spiritual storms, for the soul of the earth was trembling under the weight of its own forgetfulness. I saw the prophets of old standing within the vibration of that land, their words burning brighter as the ages darkened. Daniel, Ezekiel, Isaiah, each had seen the outline of this hour, and each warned that when the nations surround Israel in hatred, it will not be Israel that perishes, but the illusion of human control. For the Lord of balance does not sleep, and his justice comes not in anger, but in the reordering of all things. I saw earthquakes beneath mountains. I saw fire falling not from heaven, but from the hands of men who thought themselves gods. And I heard within that chaos the voice of law declaring, "Be still, and know that I am." It was then made clear to me that the conflict of our time is not merely between Israel and Iran, nor between East and West, but between remembrance and forgetfulness, between spirit that knows its source and mind that denies it. Iran rises today as Persia rose in ages past to test the faith of the world. It challenges not only Israel's right to exist, but the right of truth to endure amid the pride of intellect. Yet I tell you, its rise is permitted by heaven, for without resistance the will of man cannot discover its weakness. The Eternal uses opposition as mirror, that every soul might see what it truly serves. Thus even those who curse the name of God serve his design, though they know it not. I saw in the field of prophecy that Iran's growing power, its weapons, its alliances, even its defiance, are threads in a tapestry that leads not to conquest, but to revelation. For the moment will come when the armies gather as in the vision of Ezekiel, and in that hour the unseen law will act. The earth will shake, the heavens will thunder, and confusion will descend upon those who trust in force. They will turn one upon another, for the energy of domination cannot sustain unity. Fear will consume the proud, and the hand of the Eternal will restore balance. But hear me, for this is not the wrath of vengeance, it is the mercy of correction. The Creator does not destroy to punish, he dissolves illusion so that truth may endure. When the smoke clears and the noise of battle fades, the world will see that no weapon forged by man can prevail against the law of spirit. Then shall men remember the words of old, that not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord. In that hour the awakening will begin, and those who once mocked faith will seek its light, for the futility of their strength will stand naked before them. I saw too that within Iran itself, among its people, there are souls of great light, inheritors of ancient wisdom, who remember the fire of the Magi and the teachings of the prophets who spoke before the days of Islam. They carry within them the seed of renewal, and when the great shaking comes, they will rise as voices of peace amid the ruins of pride. For God does not abandon nations. He transforms them. The spirit of Persia, which once liberated Israel from Babylon, will again find its higher note, but only after it has exhausted the song of its rebellion. This is the mystery of divine cycles. Through shadow comes purification. Through conflict comes remembrance. Therefore I say to you, do not look upon the wars of men as the final word, but as the turning of the page. Even as armies march and rulers boast, heaven prepares the field for healing. The alliances that seem so strong will fracture like clay beneath the storm, and from their fall a new order will rise, not of domination, but of understanding. Yet the time of that peace cannot come until the world has faced the truth of its own defiance. For centuries, men have sought to build kingdoms without the cornerstone of spirit, and now the structure trembles. Iran's defiance is the symbol of that trembling, for it shows what happens when intellect denies illumination. Still, the divine wastes nothing. The very forces that oppose truth become the instruments of its revelation. As I beheld these things, I heard the voice of Spirit say, Behold, I make all things new. and I understood that even the nations chosen for judgment are also chosen for redemption. When the storm has passed, the fire of faith will burn brighter, and the sons of Persia will remember the purpose of their ancient calling to seek wisdom, not dominion, to serve light, not shadow. Then shall Israel and Persia stand not as enemies, but as mirrors, reflecting one truth, that the hand of the Eternal guides both the fall and the rising, both the conflict and the peace. I tell you, this vision is not far. The signs are upon the earth, the alliances are set, and the hearts of men are being weighed. Yet those who keep their trust in the law of God will not be shaken, for they will understand that even in the trembling of nations, the will of heaven is being fulfilled. Divine intervention is not the sudden wrath of an unseen deity. It is the exact working of law correcting imbalance. And I have seen this law move through the ages as surely as the stars move across the heavens. When men lift themselves above the order of spirit, the universe responds, not in anger, but in precision. What Ezekiel described as earthquakes, hailstones, and fire is not myth, but manifestation, the collapse of all systems that violate harmony. I tell you truly, the moment when the nations gather against Israel will not be the triumph of darkness, but the exposure of illusion. For the Eternal does not defend with armies, he defends with order, and when order acts, every false foundation crumbles. I have seen this in the records, and I say to you that the pattern of Persia's rise and its alliance with northern powers is the last echo of that ancient rebellion which began in heaven, the attempt of created will to claim dominion over divine purpose. The same vibration that moved through the empire of Babylon now moves through the councils of men who believe technology and might can replace wisdom and humility. Yet the end is written within the act. For all who exalt themselves above law fall by their own weight. The intervention of God is not thunder from clouds, but consequence released from within creation itself. The earth trembles because the imbalance of thought has reached its threshold, and when the collective mind of humanity feeds violence, the elements respond. I saw in vision the sky darkened not only by smoke of war, but by the dense vibration of fear, and through that fear the voice of truth broke like lightning, scattering deception. The armies that marched with certainty of victory turned one upon another, confused by the vibration of their own hatred. This is the law, that destruction consumes itself when it no longer serves evolution. As I watched, I knew that even the fiercest conflict is only the stage upon which spirit reveals the futility of force. In every age, the Creator allows mankind to exhaust the illusion of control, so that humility may be born anew. When the prophets spoke of God's hand smiting the nations, they meant this precise working of cause and effect. The divine need not intervene from without, for the pattern is self-correcting. The very arrogance that builds empires summons the winds that scatter them. I tell you, the earth itself is conscious, and its trembling is the voice of that consciousness seeking balance. The seas rise, the mountains shake, not by accident, but by resonance with the moral condition of humanity. When greed poisons the vibration of a people, the soil beneath them responds. When hatred becomes policy, the heavens darken to mirror it. Thus, when Ezekiel foresaw fire and storm against the invaders of Israel, he was describing the return wave of energy humanity itself set in motion. Divine justice is the reflection of human choice. Yet in that reflection lies mercy. For once the illusion is broken, awakening follows. I saw among the ruins of war a light emerging, small yet steadfast, the light of remembrance. Those who had lost all possessions turned inward and found faith. Those who had doubted learned again to pray. The collapse of pride became the birth of clarity. This is the mystery of intervention, that what appears as destruction is purification, and what men call the end is the cleansing of perception. Even Iran, the vessel of this testing, will come to its moment of revelation. Its leaders will boast, its armies will threaten, yet its destiny is not to conquer, but to witness the limits of force. For when its plans unravel, when its power meets the boundary of divine law, then the spirit of Persia will remember its ancient purpose. It will recall the wisdom of Zoroaster, who taught that the struggle of light and darkness is not between nations, but within each soul. That remembrance will begin quietly through the awakening of individual scholars, mystics, and ordinary people whose hearts still carry the spark of truth. They will see that their land's suffering is not punishment, but calling, the call to return to the vibration of service. And in that hour, when nations watch for vengeance, they will see instead renewal. For even as judgment falls, grace rises. The Eternal never destroys what he can transform. The smoke of battle will clear, and from the ashes will come understanding that no ideology can replace the law of love. I have seen it written that Israel will stand, not by might, but by miracle, and that miracle is consciousness aligned with divine law. When faith becomes the shield of a nation, no weapon prevails against it. This is not favoritism, but physics of spirit. The frequency of truth repels falsehood as light dissolves shadow. In that realization, the world will witness that the power of God is not confined to one people, but available to all who align with the law. Thus, divine intervention is universal. It is the balancing act of the cosmos restoring symmetry. The nations that seemed invincible will discover the brittleness of arrogance. The alliances formed in secrecy will fracture under the pressure of distrust. The weapons built in pride will turn upon those who forged them. Yet amid the turmoil, those who remember the source will find peace, for they will feel the rhythm of divine justice moving like the pulse of the earth beneath their feet. They will understand that prophecy is not a threat, but a map guiding consciousness back to balance. When the shaking ceases, humanity will stand humbled, yet purified, aware that no empire endures but the kingdom within. I say to you, the day will come when Iran, Israel, and the nations of the world will recognize that the only lasting victory is awareness itself. Then the words of the prophets will be fulfilled, that the knowledge of the Lord shall cover the earth as waters cover the sea. This is the promise hidden within the storm, that the end is not ruin, but restoration. Therefore, let no heart despair, for divine intervention is not destruction. It is truth unveiled, the hand of eternal law, lifting creation from the shadow it has cast upon itself. In every age there arises a power that believes it can reshape the world according to its will. And in our time that illusion wears the face of Iran's ambition and the gathering of nations that echo its defiance. I have seen in the records that this ambition is not new. It is the ancient dream of empire reborn, the desire to rule through intellect, through control, through the denial of the divine order that holds the universe together. What men call geopolitics is the outer mask of spiritual conflict. Iran seeks not only regional power, but the redefinition of power itself, a power free from the moral restraint of heaven. In this pursuit, I saw alliances forming with Russia and China, each moved by the same vibration, each seeking to construct a new world order independent of the balance once maintained by faith and law. This too is prophecy unfolding, for Daniel spoke of a final kingdom, a kingdom of iron and clay, strong in material, might yet divided in spirit. That kingdom is not one nation, but the global structure being built before your eyes. It will promise justice, yet demand submission. It will claim peace, yet breed fear. It will speak of unity while serving domination. Iran's role within it is that of catalyst, for its defiance accelerates the pattern, drawing the hidden currents of control toward their inevitable exposure. I tell you, the divine allows such systems to rise that humanity might see the consequences of forgetting the source. When men create order without spirit, the result is bondage disguised as freedom. The prophets call this the rise of the beast, not because of a creature with horns, but because it is the state of consciousness that devours compassion for the sake of efficiency, that replaces worship with technology, that exalts intellect above intuition. This is the vibration that now moves through global commerce, through the networks of information and finance, and Iran, in its rebellion against the West, unknowingly aligns with that current. It believes itself resisting domination, yet in truth it contributes to a larger pattern, the preparation for the final system of control described in Revelation, where power is centralized, individuality dissolved, and faith treated as a relic of the past. The Spirit showed me that this order will not appear suddenly but gradually through the merging of economic systems, digital currencies, and surveillance disguised as security. The nations will applaud its efficiency, for it will seem to end chaos. Yet beneath its promise lies the spirit of Antichrist, the denial of divine sovereignty within the heart of man. The danger of Iran's ambition is not its weapons, but its ideology, the belief that truth can be enforced by law and that faith can be subdued by fear. In this it mirrors every empire before it, from Babylon to Rome, from the Caesars to the modern technocrats. Each believed they could master destiny through intellect, and each was brought low by the invisible hand of the Eternal. The law has not changed. The structure of oppression always collapses upon itself, for it builds on division, and division cannot sustain life. I saw in the visions that as Iran presses toward greater power, the very alliances it forges will begin to fracture. Suspicion will grow among its partners, and the unity built on resentment will dissolve into rivalry. This is divine order working unseen, separating the clay from the iron. Yet even as the outer systems crumble, the inner lesson must be learned that no human design can stand without harmony with spirit. The danger is not the collapse itself, but the temptation that follows, for out of the ruins will arise the call for one global authority to restore peace. Men will look for a savior in politics, a leader who can bind the nations under a single rule. That leader will come, and with him the full expression of the prophecy, the Antichrist, not as monster, but as man, promising salvation through control. He will speak of light, but bring shadow. He will heal economies, yet wound souls. He will demand worship of the system that feeds him, and many will bow, for fear of chaos blinds the discernment of the heart. Yet I tell you, those who have awakened will see through him. They will know that no peace built on coercion can endure. They will remember the words of the Christ, who said that the kingdom of God is within. That remembrance will be the resistance of light, the unseen army of faith that stands against the tide. When I beheld the records of the future, I saw that even in the height of deception, truth would not be silenced. Prophets will arise, not in temples or palaces, but in the quiet places of the world, men and women who have touched the eternal law within themselves. They will speak of the inner kingdom, and though the world mocks them, their words will awaken multitudes. The power of the new order will tremble before the vibration of consciousness. For the battle described in Revelation, though clothed in the imagery of war, is fought in awareness. The mark of the beast is not a brand upon the skin, but the submission of the mind to fear. Those who hold faith will carry the mark of light, invisible yet radiant. Iran's part in this story, though it appears dark, is necessary, for it reveals the mechanism of illusion, the belief that rebellion against external control is freedom while internal bondage remains unseen. But when that illusion shatters, when its ambitions fail, then the higher purpose of Persia will emerge once more, the return to wisdom through surrender. The global order that rises will fall, the Antichrist will be unmasked, and the nations will learn that every attempt to dethrone God ends in self-destruction. This is not doom, but purification. For through these trials, the collective soul of humanity will evolve. The world that follows will not be the same. The structures of greed and fear will have burned away, and from their ashes a simpler truth will stand. That divine law alone sustains creation. I have seen it written, and I say it now: the rise of Iran, the fall of alliances, the coming of the false unity, and the awakening of the faithful are all movements of one symphony, the grand design through which the Eternal reclaims his reflection in man. Therefore, fear not the storm that comes, for it is the sound of chains breaking, the prelude to remembrance, the moment when humanity, humbled by its own inventions, turns again toward the light from which it came. The call to awareness is the true meaning of every prophecy. And I tell you that what is written about nations is only a mirror of what must awaken within the soul. The wars of kingdoms, the rise of Iran, the trembling of Israel, the alliances of the earth. These are not isolated events, but reflections of the conflict between remembrance and forgetfulness inside every human being. When the prophets spoke of the end times, they did not speak only of destruction. They spoke of unveiling, of truth made visible. The apocalypse is not the end of the world. It is the end of illusion. And those who understand this will not fear the shaking of the earth, for they will know it as the shaking of consciousness. I have seen that each soul is a nation, each mind a kingdom, and within each one the same struggle unfolds, the will to dominate versus the will to surrender, the pride of intellect against the humility of spirit. Iran, Israel, Russia, America, every land named in prophecy exists also as an energy within you. When the heart turns toward light, the nations within come into peace. But when the heart follows pride, they war against each other. This is why the scriptures repeat, watch and pray, for the first battlefield is always the inner world. In the readings given to me, the Eternal said that consciousness precedes creation, and that whatever appears in the outer field is but the echo of vibration formed in the unseen. Therefore, to change the world, one must first change the vibration from which the world is perceived. This is the law of mind, the law Christ lived when he said that the kingdom of God is within. It is not a metaphor, but a statement of physics, for the soul projects reality according to its belief. When belief aligns with fear, the world reflects war. When it aligns with love, the world reflects peace. The end times are not a punishment for sin. They are the consequence of ignorance. Humanity, having forgotten the law of unity, now confronts the results of its own separation. Yet even in that confrontation, grace moves. The turmoil of nations is the labor of rebirth. The pain of this hour is the cry of spirit breaking through the crust of material arrogance. Every earthquake, every headline, every rumor of war is a trumpet calling you to awaken. The purpose of prophecy is not to terrify, but to alert, to shake the mind free from its sleep. Those who live in awareness will see through appearances and recognize that divine order operates even in disorder. They will not panic, for they will know that the Eternal has never abandoned his creation. I have seen in the records that the souls now incarnate were born into this age by choice, to witness and to serve in the transformation of the world. You are not here by accident. You chose to stand at the turning of the cycle, to test your faith against the noise of fear, to remember light amid darkness. The prophecies of Ezekiel, Daniel, and Revelation were written for you, not as warnings of destruction, but as maps of consciousness. They describe the fall of false systems within and the restoration of the divine pattern in thought. The war of Gog and Magog, the rise of the beast, the shaking of nations, all are symbols of inner purification. When you understand this, you cease to fear events and begin to read them as messages. The question is not what will happen, but how will you perceive it? For perception determines participation. Those who see only chaos will add to chaos. Those who see divine order will anchor peace. I tell you, every thought is a thread in the tapestry of destiny. As humanity thinks, the earth responds. That is why prayer is power, not pleading, but alignment. When one prays in faith, they alter the field of vibration around them, influencing the collective mind more deeply than any weapon or law. In this lies the true defense of Israel, the true balance of Persia, the true redemption of humanity. It is consciousness, not politics, that decides the future. In the silence of awareness, you can feel the law move. When the mind quiets, the truth speaks. It says that all is one, that even the nations in conflict are parts of a single organism learning to know itself. The awakening required now is not intellectual but experiential. It demands that man turn inward and face the voice he has long ignored, the whisper that says, "Be still and remember." Awareness is not knowledge of facts, but perception of reality as it is whole, eternal, interconnected. When enough souls live from that perception, prophecy fulfills itself in peace instead of pain. For the end times are conditional. They unfold according to vibration. If fear governs, the transition is violent. If faith governs, it is gentle. The choice lies within each heart. I tell you, the real mark of the faithful is not on the forehead, but in the frequency of thought. Those who trust the divine law radiate calm even in crisis. Their presence changes rooms. Their silence heals division. Their words carry power, for they speak from alignment. Such souls are the new prophets, not foretelling events but revealing meaning. They are the children of light born for this hour. I have seen them in vision, scattered across the world, in cities and deserts, young and old, nameless yet radiant. They hold the thread of remembrance that keeps humanity from falling into despair. Their task is simple: to remember who they are and to remind others. This is the call to awareness, to live as if the divine were not distant but immediate, to act as if every gesture carried eternal weight, to think as if every thought were prayer. When such living becomes common, the outer wars will fade, for the inner peace will have prevailed. That is why I tell you, prepare not by hiding from the world, but by purifying perception. Fast not only from food, but from fear. Pray not for escape, but for understanding. The true temple is the mind, and the altar is attention. Whatever you fix your awareness upon grows. Fix it upon light, and the darkness dissolves. Fix it upon fear, and you strengthen the illusion. Awareness is the sword that divides truth from deception. In this hour, use it well, for the future depends not on governments, but on consciousness. The Eternal has written the end, but not the manner of its unfolding. That choice remains with you. Therefore awaken, for the time of prophecy is the time of possibility. And the greatest miracle of all is that within this storm you may remember the stillness that never ends. The future of Iran and of all nations is already written in the law of cause and effect. Those who sow violence will reap purification. Those who stand for peace will become instruments of healing. The scriptures remind us that beyond the wars and rumors of wars, there is a greater unfolding, the preparation for renewal. When the final storm passes, it will not be destruction that remains, but awakening. God's purpose is not to punish, but to realign. Therefore, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, but also pray for the awakening of Persia, for even those who oppose truth are souls seeking light through error. The world's prophecy is the soul's mirror. Let these revelations move you not to fear, but to readiness, to live each day in harmony with divine purpose. For as the records of the soul declare, the kingdoms of this world shall pass, but the consciousness of God shall endure forever. I have spoken of nations and prophecies, of Persia and Israel, of war and awakening. But now, as I turn inward, I see that all these visions converge into one truth. The outer world, with its noise and shifting empires, is only the surface of a deeper sea. Beneath it, the divine current moves, silent and exact, guiding every motion toward remembrance. In the quiet of the soul, I understand that the end of prophecy is not destruction, but awareness. Every vision I was shown was a mirror, revealing the hidden law that governs creation, the law that consciousness is the seed of reality. What we call history is only the dream of humanity, and what we call destiny is the moment when the dreamer begins to awaken. I tell you, I have walked through the vibration of ages and have seen that even suffering has purpose. The wars of men, the rise of kingdoms, the shaking of the earth, all are instruments through which the soul learns to see. When pain strips away illusion, what remains is truth, and truth is peace. It is written that God shall wipe away every tear, but I have seen that he does so not by changing events, but by changing perception. When the heart understands that every motion of life serves the return to unity, sorrow becomes wisdom, and fear becomes reverence. I remember the first time the Spirit spoke through me and said, "All souls are one." At that moment, I felt the entire world breathing as a single being, each heart a pulse within the body of the Eternal. That awareness has never left me. It grows stronger each time I look upon the turmoil of men and see not chaos but birth. The nations clash because they have forgotten they are limbs of the same creation. When awareness returns, the fighting will cease, for no hand can hate the other once it remembers it belongs to the same body. I tell you, the destiny of Iran, Israel, of every nation named in the sacred writings, is the same: to awaken to unity through the testing of separation. The lesson repeats until it is learned. The end times are the end of forgetfulness. In the stillness where I commune with the unseen, I no longer see prophecy as threat but as invitation. The Eternal does not command fear. He invites awakening. Every sign in the heavens, every tremor of the earth, every cry of the heart is a whisper saying, remember who you are. When I surrender to that whisper, I feel the universe breathing through me, and I understand that the kingdom of God has never been distant. It is here, in the awareness that sees beyond opposites. The moment a man forgives, the war in his soul ends. The moment he loves, the prophecy of peace fulfills itself. That is the hidden meaning of all revelation, that redemption is not postponed to the future. It happens in consciousness now. As I look once more upon the visions that shape this message, I see the faces of those yet unborn who will read the signs not as dread, but as guidance. They will understand that divine intervention was never about punishment, but about correction, the restoration of balance between heaven and earth, between thought and love. The Spirit showed me that a time will come when science and faith will no longer be enemies, when the wisdom of Persia, the faith of Israel, and the compassion of Christ will blend into one understanding that God is law and law is love. That union will mark the true new world order, not of men but of spirit. Now, as I speak, I feel the weight of time dissolving. The past and the future fold into the present, and the present becomes eternity. There is no more fear, only the vibration of awareness expanding through creation. I see that the prophecy is already fulfilled in those who awaken. For when a single soul remembers truth, the balance of the world shifts. That is the power. You carry the same power that shaped the prophets, the same light that guided the Magi, the same voice that spoke to me in the silence. It lives in you,